In the late 1800s, you could walk into a corner store and buy a bottle of syrup that promised to cure your cancer, but it was actually just colored water mixed with liquid cocaine. Back then, the medicine cabinet in a typical family home was less like a pharmacy and more like a collection of dangerous street drugs disguised as miracle cures. Today, we are going to look at the wild and completely unregulated world of the patent medicine business, where the only thing more famous than the cures were the lies used to sell them. You will see how these flashy bottles paved the way for modern advertising while accidentally poisoning thousands of people along the way. We will also find out why your favorite soda brands today actually started out as these questionable health tonics during a time when anyone could call themselves a doctor. To understand how this started, we have to go back to the 19th century when being sick was a lot scarier than it is today. Professional doctors were very expensive, and they often lived far away in big cities while most people lived in small rural towns or on farms. If you had a nagging cough or a backache, you could not just hop on a video call with a specialist or search for your symptoms on the internet. Professional medical care was also pretty terrifying back then, because doctors were still using things like bloodletting or giving people toxic heavy metals to treat basic fevers. This created a massive gap in the market, where people were desperate for help, but they were also very afraid of the actual medical profession. Enter the patent medicine man, who showed up with a colorful bottle and a promise that his secret recipe would fix everything without the need for a scary surgery. The term patent medicine is actually a bit of a lie, because very few of these products were ever truly patented by the government. Getting a real patent meant you had to list every single ingredient in your formula and tell the government exactly how you made the medicine. The makers of these cures did not want to do that because they wanted to keep their secret sauce a mystery, so nobody could copy their cheap recipes. Instead, they relied on something called a royal patent of favor, which was an old British system, where the king gave a specific brand his stamp of approval. In America, this basically turned into proprietary medicine, where the brand name was protected, but the actual ingredients remained a complete mystery to the public. This was a perfect setup for a scam because you could put anything you wanted into a bottle as long as you had a cool name for it and a pretty label. Literally anyone with a bathtub and a few handfuls of herbs or chemicals could start their own multi-million-dollar medicine company from their backyard. You did not need a medical degree or a license or even a basic understanding of biology to become a famous healer in the mid-1800s. The business grew fast because of the Industrial Revolution, which allowed these shady manufacturers to mass-produce thousands of bottles at a time in huge factories. The new railroad systems meant these bottles could be shipped to the tiny general stores in the middle of nowhere, where people had no other options for medicine. Mail-order catalogs also became huge, which allowed a farmer in Nebraska to order a bottle of miracle oil from a factory in New York City with just a few stamps. But how did they get people to buy this stuff in the first place when most of it did not actually work at all? The answer is that these medicine makers were actually the geniuses who invented the way we do modern advertising and branding today. They realized very early on that if you give people a recognizable character to trust, they would stop asking questions about what was inside the bottle. This is why we started seeing icons like the friendly Quaker man, or the wise Native American chief, or the caring mother figure on the front of every package. These images were designed to make you feel safe and to make you think the medicine came from a place of ancient wisdom or pure religious honesty. They also pioneered the idea of the medicine show, which was a traveling variety act that rolled into town on a big wooden wagon. These shows had banjos and dancers and fire eaters and magicians to get a huge crowd of bored townspeople to gather in the street for some free entertainment. Once the crowd was having a good time, the doctor would step out and start giving a high-energy sales pitch about his miracle tonic. He would often have people planted in the crowd who would jump up and scream that they had been healed after taking just one sip of the medicine. These plants were called shills, and they were paid to lie to their neighbors just to get the sales moving so the wagon could leave town before the lies were discovered. Advertising in newspapers was the next big step, and patent medicine companies eventually became the biggest spenders in the entire media world. In the late 1800s, more than half of all the advertising revenue for newspapers came from these fake medicine ads, which gave the companies a lot of power. If a newspaper tried to write a story saying a certain medicine was fake, the company would simply threaten to pull their ads and bankrupt the paper. This kept the media quiet for a long time and allowed the scammers to keep printing outrageous claims about curing every disease known to man. They even invented something called the Medical Almanac, which was a free book given away at general stores that every farmer kept on their kitchen table. These books had useful things like weather forecasts and planting schedules, but every other page was a giant ad for a specific brand of pills or tonics. It was the original form of content marketing, where they gave you something useful for free just so they could keep their brand in front of your face all year long. The ads used heavy psychological hooks like fear and shame to make people feel like they were failing their families if they did not buy the product. They would ask questions like, "Are you too tired to take care of your children? Or is your husband losing interest in you because of your pale skin?" They especially targeted women because women were often the ones making the health decisions for the household, and they felt ignored by the male-dominated medical world. These companies sold female tonics that promised to fix nervousness or lady vapors, but in reality they were just making these women very intoxicated. This brings us to the darkest secret of the patent medicine era, which was the actual physical cost of taking these unregulated potions. Since there were no laws saying you had to list your ingredients, the manufacturers could put some truly terrifying stuff into their bottles. The most common base for almost every liquid medicine back then was high-proof alcohol, which was often 40 or even 80% pure grain spirit. A person might feel a lot better 5 minutes after taking their medicine, but that was only because they were suddenly very drunk and didn't care about their pain anymore. People who were strictly against drinking alcohol for religious reasons were often accidentally becoming alcoholics because they were taking several shots of medicine every single day. It got even worse when the manufacturers started adding heavy narcotics like opium and morphine and cocaine to their secret formulas. Cocaine was marketed as a great way to cure a toothache or to give you more energy to get through a long day of hard manual labor. Opium was used in almost every cough syrup because it was very effective at suppressing a cough, but it was also incredibly addictive and dangerous. One of the biggest tragedies of this era involved something called soothing syrups, which were marketed specifically to mothers with fussy or crying babies. These syrups were loaded with morphine, and they were so strong that they would sometimes put a baby to sleep so deeply that the child would never wake up again. Doctors eventually started calling these products baby killers because of the high number of infant deaths that were linked directly to these unregulated narcotics. Even if the medicine did not have drugs in it, there was a good chance it contained toxic heavy metals that would slowly poison the person taking it. They used mercury to treat things like syphilis, and they used lead or arsenic in powders that were supposed to make a person's skin look clearer and more beautiful. The people taking these cures would often end up with their hair falling out, or their teeth rotting, or their internal organs failing after just a few months of use. One of the most famous scammers of this entire period was a man named Clark Stanley, who was known across the country as the Snake Oil King. Stanley would stand in front of huge crowds at the World's Fair and pretend to kill a real rattlesnake and boil it down to make his famous snake oil liniment. He claimed his oil was an ancient secret he learned from Native American healers and that it could cure everything from arthritis to animal bites. Years later, the government finally tested a bottle of his famous oil, and they discovered that it contained absolutely zero snake oil of any kind. It was actually just a mixture of mineral oil and beef fat and red pepper and turpentine, which was basically just a cheapskin irritant that did nothing for health. This is exactly where we get the term snake oil salesman when we talk about someone who is trying to sell a product that is a total fraud. As the 1900s began, people finally started to wake up to the fact that they were being lied to and poisoned by these massive corporations. This was the era of the muckrakers who were brave investigative journalists, determined to expose the corruption and the filth of the industrial world. The most important of these was a man named Samuel Hopkins Adams, who spent a year researching the industry for a series of articles called The Great American Fraud. His stories were published in a popular magazine called Collier's Weekly, and they were a massive bombshell that shocked the entire nation. Adams did not just guess that the medicines were fake, he actually went to laboratories and had the products tested by real scientists to prove what was in them. He published lists of medicines that contained nothing but alcohol, and he named the specific products that were causing children to die from drug overdoses. At the same time, the Ladies' Home Journal, which was one of the most powerful magazines in the country, decided to take a stand against the industry. They banned all patent medicine ads from their pages, and they started printing the real ingredients of popular tonics to show women they were being tricked. The editor of the magazine even showed that some of these famous medicines were being endorsed by people who had been dead for 10 years. This public outcry created a massive wave of pressure on the government to finally step in and protect the people from these corporate predators. In 1906, President Theodore Roosevelt signed the Pure Food and Drug Act, which was the first major law of its kind in the history of the United States. This law was a total game changer because it meant that companies could no longer lie on their labels about what was inside their bottles. If a medicine contained alcohol or morphine or cocaine, the manufacturer was now legally required to list those ingredients clearly on the package. It also made it illegal for companies to make completely false claims about their products being able to cure things like cancer or tuberculosis. This law was basically the birth certificate of the Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, which is the agency that still regulates our medicine today. The patent medicine industry did not disappear overnight, but the new laws made it much harder for the scammers to survive in the light of day. Many of the most famous brands had to either go out of business or completely change their formulas to stay on the right side of the law. You might be surprised to learn that some of the biggest brands in the world today are actually survivors of the patent medicine era. Coca-Cola famously started out as a medicinal tonic that contained small amounts of cocaine from the coca leaf and caffeine from the cola nut. When the laws changed, they removed the cocaine and added more sugar, turning it from a brain tonic into the world's most popular soft drink. The soda 7-Up also started as a health product that contained lithium, which is a drug used today to treat serious mental health conditions like bipolar disorder. They marketed it as a way to take the ouch out of a hangover before they were forced to remove the mood-altering drugs in the 1940s. Even Luden's cough drops and Hires root beer started as patent medicines that were sold as cures for various lung and stomach problems. The legacy of the patent medicine business is still very much alive in the way we see advertisements and commercials on television every single day. They were the ones who first figured out that a celebrity endorsement or a before and after photo could convince someone to spend their hard-earned money. They also proved that humans have a very deep psychological need to believe in a miracle cure that will solve all their problems with no effort. Today we see this same pattern in the unregulated supplement industry, where influencers on social media promise that a special powder will fix your metabolism. While the ingredients might be safer now than they were in 1880, the tactics of using fear and hope to sell a dream are exactly the same as they were back then. It is a reminder that even though our technology and our laws have changed, our human desire for a quick fix makes us vulnerable to the next snake oil salesman. History shows us that the best defense against a scam is not a fancy bottle or a loud pitch, but a healthy dose of scientific skepticism and a good look at the label.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us.